Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked room today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret?
The 4:15 Express, A Christmas Ghost Story by Amelia B. Edwards, read by the human Tony Walker, who drinks coffee, just saying. Did you know that over 65% of people who watch this channel haven't subscribed? If you do subscribe, you can help push me over the 100,000 subscribers mark. And I believe, according to YouTube folklore, that allows me to speak to a person. And if I could speak to a person rather than a robot, I'm really confident that we can sort out this problem of them demonetizing me. So subscribe, do me a favor. Won't cost you anything, please. The events which I'm about to relate took place between 9 and 10 years ago. Sebastopol had fallen in the early spring. The Peace of Paris had been concluded since March. Our commercial relations with the Russian Empire were but recently renewed, and I, returning home after my first northward journey since the war, was well pleased with the prospect of spending the month of December under the hospitable and thoroughly English roof of my excellent friend Jonathan Jelf, Esquire, of Dumbleton Manor, Clayborough, East Anglia. Travelling in the interests of the well-known firm in which it is my lot to be a junior partner, I had been called upon to visit not only the capitals of Russia and Poland, but had found it also necessary to pass some weeks among the trading ports of the Baltic, whence it came that the year was already far spent before I again set foot on English soil, and that instead of shooting pheasants with him, as I had hoped, in October, I came to be my friend's guest during the more genial Christmastide. My voyage over, and a few days given up to business in Liverpool and London, I hastened down to Clayborough with all the delight of a schoolboy whose holidays are at hand. My way lay by the Great East Anglian line as far as Clayborough station, where I was to be met by one of the Dumbleton carriages and conveyed across the remaining 9 miles of country. It was a foggy afternoon, singularly warm for the 4th of December, and I had arranged to leave London by the 4:15 express. The early darkness of winter had already closed in. The lamps were lighted in the carriages. A clinging damp dimmed the windows, adhered to the door handles, and pervaded all the atmosphere, while the gas jets at the neighbouring bookstand diffused a luminous haze that only served to make the gloom of the terminus more visible. Having arrived some 7 minutes before the starting of the train, and by the contrivance of the guard taken sole possession of an empty compartment, I lighted my travelling lamp, made myself particularly snug, and settled down to the undisturbed enjoyment of a book and a cigar. Great, therefore, was my disappointment when, at the last moment, a gentleman came hurrying along the platform, glanced into my carriage, opened the locked door with a private key, and stepped in. It struck me at the first glance that I had seen him before. A tall, spare man, thin-lipped, light-eyed, with an ungraceful stoop in the shoulders, and scant grey hair worn somewhat long upon the collar. He carried a light waterproof coat, an umbrella, and a large brown japanned deed-box, which last he placed under the seat. This done, he felt carefully in his breast pocket, as if to make certain of the safety of his purse or pocket-book, laid his umbrella in the netting overhead, spread the waterproof over his knees, and exchanged his hat for a travelling cap of some Scotch material. By this time the train was moving out of the station and into the faint grey of the wintry twilight beyond. I now recognized my companion. I recognized him from the moment when he removed his hat and uncovered the lofty, furrowed, and somewhat narrow brow beneath. I had met him, as I distinctly remembered, some 3 years before, at the very house for which, in all probability, he was now bound like myself. His name was Dwerrihouse. He was a lawyer by profession, and, if I was not greatly mistaken, was first cousin to the wife of my host. I knew also that he was a man eminently well-to-do, both as regarded his professional and private means. The Jelfs entertained him with that sort of observant courtesy which falls to the lot of the rich relation, The children made much of him, and the old butler, albeit somewhat surly to the general, treated him with deference. I thought, observing him by the vague mixture of lamplight and twilight, that Mrs. Jelf's cousin looked all the worse for the 3 years' wear and tear which had gone over his head since our last meeting. He was very pale, and had a restless light in his eye that I didn't remember to have observed before. The anxious lines, too, about his mouth were deepened, and there was a cavernous hollow look about his cheeks and temples, which seemed to speak of sickness or sorrow. He had glanced at me as he came in, but without any gleam of recognition in his face. Now he glanced again, as I fancied, somewhat doubtfully. When he did so for the third or fourth time, I ventured to address him. "Mr. John Dwerrihouse, I think." "That is my name," he replied. "I had the pleasure of meeting you at Dumbleton about 3 years ago." Mr. Dwerrihouse bowed. "I thought I knew your face," he said, "but your name, I regret to say—" "Langford, William Langford. I've known Jonathan Jelf since we were boys together at Merchant Taylor's, and I generally spend a few weeks at Dumbleton in the shooting season." "I suppose we are bound for the same destination?" "Not if you're on your way to the manor," he replied. "I'm travelling about on business, rather troublesome business, too, whilst you doubtless have only pleasure in view." "Just so. I am in the habit of looking forward to this visit as to the brightest 3 weeks in all the year." "It is a pleasant house," said Mr. Dwerrihouse. "The pleasantest I know. And Jelf is thoroughly hospitable. The best and kindest fellow in the world." "They have invited me to spend Christmas week with them," pursued Mr. Dwerrihouse after a moment's pause. "And you're coming?" I cannot tell. It must depend on the issue of this business which I have in hand. You've heard, perhaps, that we were about to construct a branch line from Blackwater to Stockbridge. I explained that I had been for some months away from England, and had therefore heard nothing of the contemplated improvement. Mr. Dwerrihouse smiled complacently. "It will be an improvement," he said, "a great improvement. Stockbridge is a flourishing town, and only needs a more direct railway communication with the metropolis to become an important centre of commerce. This branch was my own idea. I brought the project before the board, and have myself superintended the execution of it up to the present time." "You are an East Anglian director, I presume?" "My interest in the company," replied Mr. Dwerrihouse, "is threefold. I am a director, I am a considerable shareholder, and as head of the firm of Dwerrihouse and Craik, I am the company's principal solicitor." Loquacious, self-important, full of his pet project, and apparently unable to talk on any other subject, Mr. Dwerrihouse then went on to tell of the opposition he had encountered, and the obstacles he had overcome in the cause of the Stockbridge branch. I was entertained with a multitude of local details and local grievances. The rapacity of one squire, the impracticability of another, the indignation of the rector whose glebe was threatened, the culpable indifference of the Stockbridge townspeople, who could not be brought to see that their most vital interests hinged upon a junction with the Great East Anglian line, the spite of the local newspaper, and the unheard-of difficulties attending the common question, were each and all laid before me with a circumstantially that possessed the deepest interest for my excellent fellow-traveller, but none whatever for myself. From these, to my despair, he went on to more intricate matters, to the approximate expenses of the construction per mile, to the estimates sent in by different contractors, to the probable traffic returns of the new line, to the provisional clauses of the new Act as enumerated in Schedule D of the company's last half-yearly report, and so on, and on, till my head ached, and my attention flagged, and my eyes kept closing in spite of every effort that I made to keep them open. At length I was roused by these words: £75,000, cash down. £75,000, cash down, I repeated in the liveliest tone I could assume. "That is a heavy sum." "A heavy sum to carry here," replied Mr. Dwerrihouse, pointing significantly to his breast pocket, "but a mere fraction of what we shall ultimately have to pay." "You do not mean to say that you have £75,000 at this moment upon your person?" I exclaimed. "My good sir, have I not been telling you so for the last half hour?" said Mr. Dwerrihouse, testily. "That money has to be paid over at 8:30 this evening at the office of Sir Thomas's solicitors on completion of the deed of sale." "But how will you get across by night from Blackwater to Stockbridge with £75,000 in your pocket?" "To Stockbridge!" echoed the lawyer. "I find I have made myself very imperfectly understood. I thought I had explained how this sum carries our new line only as far as Mallingford, this first stage, as it were, of our journey, and how our route from Blackwater to Mallingford lies entirely through Sir Thomas Liddell's property." I beg your pardon," I stammered. I fear my thoughts were wandering. So you only go as far as Mallingford tonight?" "Precisely. I shall get a conveyance from the Blackwater Arms. And you?" "Oh, Jelf sends a trap to meet me at Clayborough. Can I be the bearer of any message from you? You may say, if you please, Mr. Langford, that I wished I could have been your companion all the way, and that I will come over, if possible, before Christmas. Nothing more?" Mr. Dwerrihouse smiled grimly. "Well," he said, "you may tell my cousin that she need not burn the hall down in my honour this time, and that I shall be obliged if she will order the blue-room chimney to be swept before I arrive." "Oh, that sounds tragic. Had you a conflagration on the occasion of your last visit to Dumbleton?" "Something like it. There had been no fire lighted in my bedroom since the spring. The flue was foul, and the rooks had built in it. So when I went up to dress for dinner, I found the room full of smoke, and the chimney on fire. Are we already at Blackwater?" The train had gradually come to a pause, while Mr. Dwerrihouse was speaking, and on putting my head out of the window, I could see the station some few hundred yards ahead. There was another train before us blocking the way, and the ticket-taker was making use of the delay to collect the Blackwater tickets. I had scarcely ascertained our position when the ruddy-faced official appeared at our carriage door. "Ticket, sir?" said he. "I'm for Clayborough," I replied, holding out the tiny pink card. He took it, glanced at it by the light of his little lantern, gave it back, looked, as I fancied, somewhat sharply at my fellow-traveller, and disappeared. "He didn't ask for yours?" I said, with some surprise. "They never do," said Mr. Dwerrihouse. "They all know me, and of course I travel free." "Blackwater! Blackwater!" cried the porter, running along the platform beside us as we glided into the station. Mr. Dwerrihouse pulled out his deed-box, put his travelling cap in his pocket, resumed his hat, took down his umbrella, and prepared to be gone. "Many thanks, Mr. Langford, for your society," he said with old-fashioned courtesy. "I wish you a good evening." "Good evening," I replied, putting out my hand. But he either didn't see it or did not choose to see it, and, slightly lifting his hat, stepped out upon the platform. Having done this, he moved slowly away and mingled with the departing crowd. Leaning forward to watch him out of sight, I trod upon something which proved to be a cigar case. It had fallen, no doubt, from the pocket of his waterproof coat, and was made of dark Morocco leather with a silver monogram upon the side. I sprang out of the carriage just as the guard came up to lock me in. "Is there 1 minute to spare?" I asked eagerly. "The gentleman who travelled down with me from town has dropped his cigar case. He's not yet out of the station." "Just a minute and a half, sir," replied the guard. You must be quick." I dashed along the platform as fast as my feet could carry me. It was a large station, and Mr. Dwerrihouse had by this time got more than halfway to the farther end. I, however, saw him distinctly, moving slowly with the stream. Then, as I drew nearer, I saw that he had met some friend, that they were talking as they walked, and that they presently fell back somewhat from the crowd, and stood aside in earnest conversation. I made straight for the spot where they were waiting. There was a vivid gas jet just above their heads, and the light fell full upon their faces. I saw both distinctly, the face of Mr. Dwerrihouse and the face of his companion. Running, breathless, eager as I was, getting in the way of the porters and passengers, and fearful every instant lest I should see the train going on without me, I yet observed that the newcomer was considerably younger and shorter than the director, that he was sandy-haired, mustachioed, small-featured, and dressed in a close-cut suit of Scotch tweed. I was now within a few yards of him. I ran against a stout gentleman. I was nearly knocked down by a luggage truck. I stumbled over a carpet bag. I gained the spot just as the driver's whistle warned me to return. To my utter stupefaction, they were no longer there. I had seen them but 2 seconds before, and they were gone. I stood still. I looked to right and left. I saw no sign of them in any direction. It was as if the platform had gaped and swallowed them. There were 2 gentlemen standing here a moment ago, I said to a porter at my elbow. Which way can they have gone? I saw no gentlemen, sir, replied the man. The whistle shrilled out again. The guard, far up the platform, held up his arm and shouted to me, "Come on!" "If you're going by this train, sir," said the porter, "you must run for it." I did run for it, just gained the carriage as the train began to move, was shoved in by the guard, and left breathless and bewildered with Mr. Dwerrihouse's cigar case still in my hand. It was the strangest disappearance in the world. It was like a transformation trick in a pantomime. They were there one moment, palpably there, talking, with the gaslight full upon their faces, and the next moment they were gone. There was no door near, no window, no staircase. It was a mere slip of barren platform, tapestried with big advertisements. Could anything be more mysterious? It wasn't worth thinking about, and yet, for my life, I couldn't help pondering upon it. Pondering, wondering, conjecturing, turning it over and over in my mind and beating my brains for a solution of the enigma. I thought of it all the way from Blackwater to Clayborough. I thought of it all the way from Clayborough to Dumbleton. As I rattled along the smooth highway in a trim dog-cart drawn by a splendid black mare, and driven by the silentest and dapperest of East Anglian grooms. We did the 9 miles in something less than an hour, and pulled out before the lodge gates just as the church clock was striking 7:30. A couple of minutes more, and the warm glow of the lighted hall was flooding out upon the gravel. A hearty grasp was upon my hand, and a clear, jovial voice was bidding me, "Welcome to Dumbleton." "And now, my dear fellow," said my host, when the first greeting was over, "you have no time to spare. We dine at 8, and there are people coming to meet you, so you must get the dressing business over as quickly as may be. By the way, you will meet some acquaintances. The Biddulphs are coming, and Prendergast of the Skirmishers, is staying in the house. Adieu. Mrs. Jelf will be expecting you in the drawing-room." I was ushered to my room, not the blue room, of which Mr. Dwerrihouse had made disagreeable experience, but a pretty little bachelor's chamber, hung with the delicate chintz and made cheerful by a blazing fire. I unlocked my portmanteau. I tried to be expeditious, but the memory of my railway adventure haunted me. I couldn't get free of it. I could not shake it off. It impeded me. It worried me. It tripped me up. It caused me to mislay my studs, to mistie my cravat, to wrench the buttons off my gloves. Worst of all, it made me so late that the party had all assembled before I reached the drawing-room. I had scarcely paid my respects to Mrs. Jelf when dinner was announced, and we paired off, some 8 or 10 couples strong, into the dining-room. I'm not going to describe either the guests or the dinner. All provincial parties bear the strictest family resemblance, and I am not aware that an East Anglian banquet offers any exception to the rule. There was the usual country baronet and his wife. There were the usual country parsons and their wives. There was the sempiternal turkey and haunch of venison, vanitas vanitatum. There is nothing new under the sun. I was placed about midway down the table. I had taken one rector's wife down to dinner, and I had another at my left hand. They talked across me, and the talk was all about babies. It was dreadfully dull. At length there came a pause. The entrees had just been removed, and the turkey had come upon the scene. The conversation had all along been one of the languidest, but at this moment it happened to have stagnated altogether. Jelf was carving the turkey. Mrs. Jelf looked as if she was trying to think of something to say. Everybody else was silent. Moved by an unlucky impulse, I thought I would relate my adventure. "By the way, Jelf," I began, "I came down part of the way today with a friend of yours." "Indeed?" said the master of the feast, slicing scientifically into the breast of the turkey. "With whom, pray?" with one who bade me tell you that he should, if possible, pay you a visit before Christmas." "Well, I cannot think who that would be," said my friend, smiling. "Must be Major Thorpe," suggested Mrs. Jelf. I shook my head. "It wasn't Major Thorpe," I replied. "It was a near relation of your own, Mrs. Jelf." "Then I am more puzzled than ever," replied my hostess. "Pray tell me who it was." "It was no less a person than your cousin, Mr. John Dwerrihouse." Jonathan Jelf laid down his knife and fork. Mrs. Jelf looked at me in a strange, startled way and never said a word. "And he desired me to tell you, my dear madam, that you need not take the trouble to burn the hall down in his honour this time, but only to have the chimney of the blue room swept before his arrival." Before I had reached the end of my sentence, I became aware of something ominous in the faces of the guests. I felt I had said something which I had better have left unsaid, and that for some unexplained reason my words had evoked a general consternation. I sat confounded, not daring to utter another syllable, and for at least 2 whole minutes there was dead silence round the table. Then Captain Prendergast came to the rescue. "You've been abroad for some months, haven't you, Mr. Langford?" he said, with the desperation of one who flings himself into the breach. "I heard you'd been to Russia. Surely you have something to tell us of the state and temper of the country after the war?" I was heartily grateful to the gallant skirmisher for his diversion in my favour. I answered him, I fear, somewhat lamely, but he kept the conversation up, and presently 1 or 2 others joined in, and so the difficulty, whatever it might have been, was bridged over, but not repaired. Something, an awkwardness, a visible constraint remained. The guests hitherto had been simply dull, but now they were evidently uncomfortable and embarrassed. The dessert had scarcely been placed upon the table when the ladies left the room. I seized the opportunity to drop into a vacant chair next to Captain Prendergast. "In heaven's name," I whispered, "what was the matter just now? What had I said?" "You mentioned the name of John Dwerrihouse." "What of that? I'd seen him not 2 hours before." "It is a most astounding circumstance that you should have seen him," said Captain Prendergast. "Are you sure it was he?" "As sure as of my own identity. We were talking all the way between London and Blackwater. But why does that surprise you?" "Because," replied Captain Prendergast, dropping his voice to the lowest whisper, "because John Dwerrihouse absconded 3 months ago with £75,000 of the company's money, and has never been heard of since." John Dwerrihouse had absconded 3 months ago, and I had seen him only a few hours back. John Dwerrihouse had embezzled £75,000 of the company's money, yet told me that he had that sum upon his person. Were ever facts so strangely incongruous, so difficult to reconcile? How should he have ventured again into the light of day? How dared he show himself along the line? Above all, what had he been doing throughout those mysterious 3 months of disappearance? Perplexing questions, these. Questions which at once suggested themselves to the minds of all concerned, but which admitted of no easy solution. I could find no reply to them. Captain Prendergast had not even a suggestion to offer. Jonathan Jelf, who seized the first opportunity of drawing me aside and learning all that I had to tell, was more amazed and bewildered than either of us. He came to my room that night, when all the guests were gone, and we talked the thing over from every point of view, without, it must be confessed, arriving at any kind of conclusion. "I do not ask you," he said, "whether you can have mistaken your man. That's impossible. As impossible as that I should mistake some stranger for yourself. It's not a question of looks or voice, but facts. That he should have alluded to the fire in the blue room. It's proof enough of John Dwerrihouse's identity. How did he look? Older, I thought, considerably older, paler and more anxious." "He has had enough to make him look anxious, anyhow," said my friend gloomily, "be he innocent or guilty." "I'm inclined to believe that he's innocent," I replied. "He showed no embarrassment when I addressed him, and no uneasiness when the guard came round. His conversation was open to a fault. I might almost say that he took too freely of the business which he had in hand. That again is strange, for I know no one more reticent on such subjects. He actually told you that he had the £75,000 in his pocket." "He did." My wife has an idea about it, and she may be right. What idea? Well, she fancies women are so clever, you know, at putting themselves inside people's motives. She fancies that he was tempted, that he did actually take the money, and that he's been concealing himself these 3 months in some wild part of the country, struggling possibly with his conscience all the time, and daring neither to abscond with his booty nor to come back and restore it. But now that he has come back, that's the point. She conceives that he has probably thrown himself upon the company's mercy, made restitution of the money, and, being forgiven, is permitted to carry the business through as if nothing whatever had happened. The last, I replied, is an impossible case. Mrs. Jelf thinks like a generous and delicate-minded woman, but not in the least like a board of railway directors. They would never carry forgiveness so far. I fear not, and yet it is the only conjecture that bears a semblance of likelihood. However, we can run over to Clayborough tomorrow to see if anything's to be learned. By the way, Prendergast tells me you picked up his cigar case. But I did so. Here it is. Jelf took the cigar case, examined it, and said at once that it was beyond doubt Mr. Dwerrihouse's property, and that he remembered to have seen him use it. Here, too, is his monogram on the side, he added, a big J transfixing a capital D. He used to carry the same on his notepaper. It proves in all events that I wasn't dreaming. Aye, but it is time you were asleep and dreaming now. I'm ashamed to have kept you so long. Good night. Good night, and remember that I'm more than ready to go with you to Clayborough or Blackwater or London or anywhere if I can be of the least service. Thanks, I know you mean it, old friend, and it may be that I shall put you to the test. Once more, good night. So we parted for that night, and met again in the breakfast-room at 8:30 next morning. It was a hurried, silent, uncomfortable meal. None of us had slept well, and all were thinking of the same subject. Mrs. Jelf had evidently been crying. Jelf was impatient to be off, and both Captain Prendergast and myself felt ourselves to be in the painful position of outsiders who are involuntarily brought into a domestic trouble. Within 20 minutes after we'd left the breakfast table, the dog-cart was brought round, and my friend and I were on the road to Clayborough. "Tell you what it is, Langford," he said, as we sped along between the wintry hedges, "I do not much fancy to bring up Dwerrihouse's name at Clayborough. All the officials know that he's my wife's relation, and the subject just now is hardly a pleasant one. If you don't mind, we will take the 11:10 train to Blackwater. It's an important station, and we shall stand a far better chance of picking up information there than at Clayborough." So we took the 11:10, which happened to be an express, and arriving at Blackwater about 12:15, proceeded at once to prosecute our inquiry. We began by asking for the station-master, a big, blunt, business-like person, who at once averred that he knew Mr. John Dwerrihouse perfectly well, and that there was no director on the line whom he had seen and spoken to so frequently. "He used to be down here 2 or 3 times a week about 3 months ago," said he, "when the new line was first set afoot, but since then, you know, gentlemen—" He paused significantly. Jelf flushed scarlet. Yes, he said hurriedly, "we know all about that. The point now to be ascertained is whether anything has been seen or heard of him lately." "Not to my knowledge," replied the station-master. "He is not known to have been down the line any time, yesterday, for instance." The station-master shook his head. "The East Anglians, sir," said he, "is about the last place where he would dare show himself. Why, there isn't a station-master, there isn't a guard, there isn't a porter who doesn't know Mr. Dwerrihouse by sight as well as he knows his own face in the looking-glass, or who wouldn't telegraph for the police as soon as he set eyes on him at any point along the line. Bless you, sir, there's been a standing order out against him ever since the 25th of September last. And yet," pursued my friend, "a gentleman who travelled down yesterday from London to Clayborough by the afternoon express testifies that he saw Mr. Dwerrihouse in the train, and that Mr. Dwerrihouse alighted at Blackwater station." "Quite impossible, sir," replied the station-master promptly. "Why impossible?" "Because there's no station along the line where he's so well known, or where he would run so great a risk. It would be just running his head into the lion's mouth. He would have been mad to come nigh Blackwater station, and if he had come, he would have been arrested before he left the platform." "Can you tell me who took the Blackwater tickets of that train?" "I can, sir. It was the guard, Benjamin Summers." "And Where can I find him?" "You can find him, sir, by staying here, if you please, till 1 o'clock. He'll be coming through with the up express from Crampton, which stays at Blackwater for 10 minutes." We waited for the up express, beguiling the time as best we could by strolling along the Blackwater road till we came almost to the outskirts of the town, from which the station was distant nearly a couple of miles. By 1 o'clock we were back again upon the platform and waiting for the train. It came punctually, and I at once recognised the ruddy-faced guard who had gone down with my train the evening before. "The gentlemen want to ask you something about Mr. Dwerrihouse, Summers," said the station-master by way of introduction. The guard flashed a keen glance from my face to Jelf's and back again to mine. "Mr. John Dwerrihouse, the late director?" said he, interrogatively. "The same," replied my friend. "Should you know him if you saw him?" "Oh, anywhere, sir." "Do you know if he was on the 4:15 express yesterday afternoon?" "He was not, sir." "How can you answer so positively?" "Because I looked into every carriage and saw every face in that train, and I could take my oath that Mr. Dwerrihouse was not in it. This gentleman was," he added, turning sharply upon me. "I don't know that I ever saw him before in my life, but I remember his face perfectly. You nearly missed taking your seat in time at this station, sir, and you got out of Clayborough." "Quite true," I replied, "but do you not also remember the face of the gentleman who travelled down in the same carriage with me as far as here?" "But it was my impression, sir, that you travelled down alone," said Summers, with a look of some surprise. "But by no means. I had a fellow traveller as far as Blackwater, and it was in trying to restore him the cigar case which he dropped in the carriage that I so nearly let you go on without me." "I remember you saying something about a cigar case, certainly," replied the guard, "but you asked for my ticket just before we entered the station." "Well, I did, sir." "Then you must have seen him. He sat in the corner next to the very door through which you came." No, indeed, I saw no one." I looked at Jelf. I began to think the guard was in the ex-director's confidence and paid for his silence. "But if I'd seen another traveller, I should have asked for his ticket," added Summers. "Did you see me ask for his ticket, sir?" "I observed that you did not ask for it, but he explained that by saying—" I hesitated. I feared I might be telling too much, and so broke off abruptly. The guard and the station-master exchanged glances. The former looked impatiently at his watch. "I'm obliged to go in 4 minutes more, sir," he said. One last question, then," interposed Jelf, with a sort of desperation. "If this gentleman's fellow traveller had been Mr. John Dwerrihouse, and he had been sitting in the corner next to the door by which you took the tickets, could you have failed to see and recognise him?" "Bah, no, sir. It would have been quite impossible." "And you are certain you did not see him?" "As I said before, sir, I could take my oath. I did not see him. And if it wasn't that I don't like to contradict the gentleman, I would say I could also take my oath that this gentleman is quite alone in the carriage, the whole way from London to Clayborough. Why, sir," he added, dropping his voice so as to be inaudible to the station-master, who had been called away to speak to some person close by, "you expressly asked me to give you a compartment to yourself, and I did so. I locked you in, and you were so good as to give me something for myself." "Yes, but Mr. Dwerrihouse had a key of his own." "I never saw him, sir. I saw no one in the compartment but yourself. Beg pardon, sir. My time's up." And with this the ruddy guard touched his cap and was gone. In another minute the heavy panting of the engine began afresh, and the train glided slowly out of the station. We looked at each other for some moments in silence. I was the first to speak. "Mr. Benjamin Summers knows more than he chooses to tell," I said. "Huh, you think so?" "It must be. He couldn't have come to the door without seeing him. It's impossible." "There is one thing not impossible, my dear fellow." "What is that?" "That you may have fallen asleep and dreamt the whole thing." Could I dream of a branch line that I'd never heard of? Could I dream of 101 business details that I had no kind of interest in? Could I dream of the £75,000? Perhaps you might have seen or heard some vague account of the affair while you were abroad. It might have made no impression upon you at the time, and might have come back to you in your dreams, recalled perhaps by the names of the stations on the line. What about the fire in the chimney of the Blue Room? Should I have heard of that during my journey? Well, no. I admit there is a difficulty about that point. What about the cigar case? By Jove, there is the cigar case. That is a stubborn fact. Well, it's a mysterious affair, and it will need a better detective than myself, I fancy, to clear it up. I suppose we may as well go home. A week had not gone by when I received a letter from the secretary of the East Anglian Railway Company, requesting the favour of my attendance at a special board meeting, not then many days distant. No reasons were alleged, and no apologies offered for this demand upon my time, but they had heard, it was clear, of my inquiries about the missing director, and had a mind to put me through some sort of official examination upon the subject. Being still a guest at Dumbleton Hall, I had to go up to London for the purpose, and John Jelf accompanied me. I found the direction of the great East Anglian line represented by a party of some 12 or 14 gentlemen, seated in solemn conclave round a huge green baize table in a gloomy boardroom adjoining the London terminus. Being courteously received by the chairman, who at once began by saying that certain statements of mine respecting Mr. John Dwerrihouse had come to the knowledge of the direction, and that they, in consequence, desired to confer with me on those points. We were placed at the table, and the inquiry proceeded in due form. I was first asked if I knew Mr. John Dwerrihouse, how long I had been acquainted with him, and whether I could identify him at sight. I was then asked when I had seen him last, to which I replied, on the 4th of this present month, December, 1856. Then came the inquiry of where I had seen him on that 4th day of December, to which I replied that I met him in a first-class compartment of the 4:15 down express, that he got in just as the train was leaving the London terminus, and that he alighted at Blackwater station. The chairman then inquired whether I had held any communication with my fellow traveller, whereupon I related, as I could remember it, the whole bulk and substance of Mr. John Dwerrihouse's diffuse information respecting the new branch line. To all this the board listened with profound attention, while the chairman presided and the secretary took notes. I then produced the cigar case. It was passed from hand to hand and recognised by all. There was not a man present who did not remember that plain cigar case with its silver monogram, or to whom it seemed anything less than entirely corroborative of my evidence. When at length I had told all that I had to tell, the chairman whispered something to the secretary. The secretary touched the silver handbell, and the guard, Benjamin Summers, was ushered into the room. He was then examined as carefully as myself. He declared that he knew Mr. John Dwerrihouse perfectly well, that he could not be mistaken in him, that he remembered going down with the 4:15 express on the afternoon in question, that he remembered me, and that there being one or two empty first-class compartments on that especial afternoon, he had, in compliance with my request, placed me in a carriage by myself. He was positive that I remained alone all the way in that compartment from London to Clayborough. He was ready to take his oath that Mr. Dwerrihouse was neither in that carriage with me nor in any compartment of that train. He remembered distinctly to have examined my ticket at Blackwater, was certain that there was no one else at that time in the carriage, could not have failed to observe a second person if there had been one, and that second person being John Dwerrihouse, should have quietly double-locked the door of the carriage and have given information to the Blackwater station-master. So clear, so decisive, so ready was Summers with his testimony that the board looked fairly puzzled. "You hear this person's statement, Mr. Langford?" said the chairman. "It contradicts yours in every particular. What have you to say in reply?" I can only repeat what I said before. I am quite as positive of the truth of my own assertions as Mr. Summers can be of the truth of his." "You say that Mr. Dwerrihouse alighted at Blackwater, and that he was in possession of a private key. Are you sure that he had not alighted by means of that key before the guard came round for the tickets?" "I'm quite positive that he didn't leave the carriage till the train had fairly entered the station, and the other Blackwater passengers alighted. I even saw that he was met there by a friend." "Indeed? Did you see that person distinctly?" "Quite distinctly." "Can you describe his appearance?" I think so. He was short and very slight, sandy-haired, with a bushy moustache and beard, and he wore a closely fitting suit of grey tweed. His age I should take to be about 38 or 40. "Did Mr. Dwerrihouse leave the station in this person's company?" "I cannot tell. I saw them walking together down the platform. and then I saw them standing aside under a gas jet, talking earnestly. After that, I lost sight of them quite suddenly, and just then my train went on, and I with it. The chairman and the secretary conferred together in an undertone. The directors whispered to each other. One or two looked suspiciously at the guard. I could see that my evidence remained unshaken, and that, like myself, they suspected some complicity between the guard and the defaulter. "How far did you conduct that 4:15 express on the day in question, Summers?" asked the chairman. All through, sir," replied the guard, "from London to Crampton." "How was it that you were not relieved at Clayborough? I thought there was always a change of guards at Clayborough." "Well, it used to be, sir, till the new regulations came in force last midsummer, since when the guards in charge of express trains go the whole way through." The chairman turned to the secretary. "I think it would be as well," he said, "if we had the day book to refer to upon this point." Again the secretary touched the silver handbell and desired the porter in attendance to summon Mr. Raikes. From a word or two dropped by another of the directors, I gathered that Mr. Raikes was one of the under-secretaries. He came, a small, slight, sandy-haired, keen-eyed man, with an eager, nervous manner and a forest of light beard and moustache. He just showed himself at the door of the boardroom, and being requested to bring a certain day-book from a certain shelf in a certain room, bowed and vanished. He was there such a moment, and the surprise of seeing him was so great and sudden, that it was not until the door had closed upon him that I found voice to speak. He was no sooner gone, however, than I sprang to my feet. "That person," I said, "is the same who met Mr. Dwerrihouse upon the platform at Blackwater." There was a general movement of surprise. The chairman looked grave and somewhat agitated. "Take care, Mr. Langford," he said. "Take care what you say. I am as positive of his identity as of my own. Do you consider the consequences of your words? Do you consider that you are bringing a charge of the gravest character against one of the company's servants?" "I'm willing to be put upon my oath if necessary. The man who came to that door a minute since is the same whom I saw talking to Mr. Dwerrihouse on the Blackwater platform. Were he 20 times the company's servant, I could say neither more nor less." The chairman turned again to the guard. "Did you see Mr. Raikes in the train or on the platform?" he asked. Summers shook his head. "I'm confident Mr. Raikes was not in the train," he said, "and I certainly didn't see him on the platform." The chairman turned next to the secretary. "Mr. Raikes is in your office, Mr. Hunter," he said. "Can you remember if he was absent on the 4th instant?" "Bob, I don't think he was," replied the secretary, "but I'm not prepared to speak positively. I've been away most afternoons myself lately, and Mr. Raikes might easily have absented himself if he had been so disposed." At this moment the under-secretary returned with the day-book under his arm. "Be pleased to refer Mr. Raikes," said the chairman, "to the entries on the 4th instant, and see what Benjamin Summers' duties were upon that day." Mr. Raikes threw open the cumbrous volume, and ran a practised eye and finger down some 3 or 4 successive columns of entries. Stopping suddenly at the foot of the page, he then read aloud that Benjamin Summers had on that day conducted the 4:15 express from London to Crampton. The chairman leaned forward in his seat, looked the under-secretary full in the face, and said quite sharply and suddenly, "Where were you, Mr. Raikes, on the same afternoon?" "I, sir." "You, Mr. Raikes? Where were you on the afternoon and evening of the 4th of the present month?" "Here, sir, in Mr. Hunter's office. Where else should I be?" There was a dash of trepidation in the under-secretary's voice as he said this, but his look of surprise was natural enough. "We have some reason for believing, Mr. Raikes, that you were absent that afternoon without leave. Was this the case?" "Certainly not, sir. I have not had a day's holiday since September. Mr. Hunter will bear me out on this." Mr. Hunter repeated what he had previously said on the subject, but added that the clerks in the adjoining office would be certain to know. Whereupon the senior clerk, a grave middle-aged person in green glasses, was summoned and interrogated. His testimony cleared the under-secretary at once. He declared that Mr. Raikes had in no instance to his knowledge been absent during office hours since his return from his annual holiday in September. I was confounded. The chairman turned to me with a smile, in which a shade of covert annoyance was scarcely apparent. "You hear, Mr. Langford?" he said. "I hear, sir, but my conviction remains unshaken." "I fear, Mr. Langford, that your convictions are very insufficiently based," replied the chairman with a doubtful cough. "I fear that you dream dreams and mistake them for actual occurrences. It is a dangerous habit of mind and might lead to dangerous results. Mr. Raikes here would have found himself in an unpleasant position had he not proved so satisfactory an alibi." I was about to reply, but he gave me no time. "I think, gentlemen," he went on to say, addressing the board, "that we should be wasting time to push this inquiry farther. Mr. Langford's evidence would seem to be of equal value throughout. The testimony of Mr. Benjamin Summers disproves his first statement, and the testimony of the last witness disproves his second. I think we may conclude that Mr. Langford fell asleep in the train on the occasion of his journey to Clayborough, and dreamt an unusually vivid and circumstantial dream, of which, however, we have now heard quite enough. There are few things more annoying than to find one's positive convictions met with incredulity. I couldn't help feeling impatience at the turn that affairs had taken. I was not proof against the civil sarcasm of the chairman's manner. Most intolerable of all, however, was the quiet smile lurking about the corners of Benjamin Summers' mouth, and the half-triumphant, half-malicious gleam in the eyes of the Under-Secretary. The man was evidently puzzled and somewhat alarmed. His looks seemed furtively to interrogate me. Who was I? What did I want? Why had I come there to do him an ill turn with his employers? What was it to me whether or not he was absent without leave? Seeing all this, and perhaps more irritated by it than the thing deserved, I begged leave to detain the attention of the board for a moment longer. Jelf plucked me impatiently by the sleeve. "Better let the thing drop," he whispered. "The chairman's right enough. You dreamt it, and the less said now the better." I was not to be silenced, however, in this fashion. I had yet something to say, and I would say it. It was to this effect: that dreams are not usually productive of tangible results, and that I requested to know in what way the chairman conceived I had evolved from my dream so substantial and well-made a delusion as the cigar case, which I had had the honour to place before him at the commencement of our interview. "The cigar case, I admit, Mr. Langford," the chairman replied, "is a very strong point in your evidence. It is your only strong point, however, and there is just a possibility that we may all be misled by a mere accidental resemblance. Will you permit me to see the case again?" "It's unlikely," I said as I handed it to him, "that any other should bear precisely this monogram, and also be in all other particulars exactly similar." The chairman examined it for a moment in silence, and then passed it to Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter turned it over and over, and shook his head. "This is no mere resemblance," he said. "It is John Dwerrihouse's cigar case to a certainty. I remember it perfectly. I have seen it 100 times." "I believe I may say the same," added the chairman. "Yet how shall we account for the way in which Mr. Langford asserts that it came into his possession?" "I can only repeat," I said, "that I found it on the floor of the carriage after Mr. Dwerrihouse had alighted. It was in leaning out to look after him that I trod upon it, and it was in running after him for the purpose of restoring it that I saw, or believed I saw, Mr. Raikes standing aside with him in earnest conversation." Again I felt Jonathan Jelf plucking at my sleeve. "Look at Raikes," he whispered. "Look at Raikes." I turned to where the Under-Secretary had been standing a moment before, and saw him, white as death, with lips trembling and livid, stealing towards the door. To conceive a sudden, strange, and indefinite suspicion, to fling myself in his way, to take him by the shoulders as if he were a child, and turn his craven face perforce towards the board, were with me the work of an instant. "Look at him," I exclaimed. "Look at his face. I ask no better witness to the truth of my words." The chairman's brow darkened. "Mr. Raikes," he said sternly, "if you know anything, you had better speak." Vainly trying to wrench himself from my grasp, the Under-Secretary stammered out an incoherent denial. "Let me go," he said. "I know nothing. You have no right to detain me. Let me go." "Did you, or did you not, meet Mr. John Dwerrihouse at Blackwater Station? The charge brought against you is either true or false. If true, you will do well to throw yourself upon the mercy of the board and make full confession of all that you know." The Under-Secretary wrung his hands in an agony of helpless terror. "I was away," he cried. "I was 200 miles away at the time. I know nothing about it. I have nothing to confess. I am innocent. I call God to witness I am innocent." 200 miles away, echoed the chairman. "What do you mean?" "I was in Devonshire. I had 3 weeks' leave of absence. I appealed to Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter knows I had 3 weeks' leave of absence. I was in Devonshire all the time. I can prove I was in Devonshire." Seeing him so abject, so incoherent, so wild with apprehension, the directors began to whisper gravely among themselves, while one got quietly up and called the porter to guard the door. "What has your being in Devonshire to do with the matter?" said the chairman. "When were you in Devonshire?" "Mr. Raikes took his leave in September," said the secretary, "about the time when Mr. Dwerrihouse disappeared. I never even heard that he had disappeared till I came back." "That must remain to be proved," said the chairman. "I shall at once put this matter in the hands of the police. In the meanwhile, Mr. Raikes, being myself a magistrate and used to deal with these cases, I advise you to offer no resistance, but to confess while confession may yet do you a service. As for your accomplice—" The frightened wretch fell upon his knees. "I had no accomplice," he cried. "Only have mercy upon me, only spare my life, and I will confess all. I didn't mean to harm him. I didn't mean to hurt a hair of his head. Only have mercy upon me and let me go." The chairman rose in his place, pale and agitated. "Good heavens!" he exclaimed. "What horrible mystery is this? What does it mean?" "As sure as there is a God in heaven," said Jonathan Jelf, "it means that murder has been done." "No, no, no!" shrieked Raikes, still upon his knees and cowering like a beaten hound. "Not murder. No jury that ever sat could bring in murder. I thought I'd only stunned him. I never meant to do more than stun him. Manslaughter, not murder." Overcome by the horror of this unexpected revelation, the chairman covered his face with his hand and for a moment or two remained silent. "Miserable man," he said at length, "you have betrayed yourself. You paid me confess. You urged me to throw myself upon the mercy of the board." "You have confessed to a crime which no one suspected you of having committed," replied the chairman, "and which this board has no power either to punish or forgive. All that I can do for you is to advise you to submit to the law, to plead guilty, and to conceal nothing. When did you do this deed?" The guilty man rose upon his feet and leaned heavily against the table. His answer came reluctantly, like the speech of one dreaming. On the 22nd of September." "On the 22nd of September?" I looked in Jonathan Jelf's face, and he in mine. I felt my own paling with a strange sense of wonder and dread. I saw his blanch suddenly, even to the lips. "Merciful heaven," he whispered. "What was it, then, that you saw in the train?" What was it that I saw in the train? That question remains unanswered to this day. I have never been able to reply to it. I only know that it bore the living likeness of the murdered man, whose body had been lying some 10 weeks under a rough pile of branches and brambles and rotting leaves at the bottom of a deserted chalk pit, about halfway between Blackwater and Mallingford. I know that it spoke and moved and looked as that man spoke and moved and looked in life, and I heard, or seemed to hear, things related which I could never otherwise have learned, that I was guided, as it were, by that vision on the platform to the identification of the murderer, and that a passive instrument myself, I was destined, by means of these mysterious teachings, to bring about the ends of justice. For these things I have never been able to account. As for the matter of the cigar case, it proved on inquiry that the carriage in which I travelled down that afternoon to Clayborough had not been in use for several weeks, and was, in point of fact, the same in which poor John Dwerrihouse had performed his last journey. The case had doubtless been dropped by him, and had lain unnoticed until I found it. Upon the details of the murder I have no need to dwell. Those who desire more ample particulars may find them, and the written confession of Augustus Raikes in the files of the Times for 1856. Enough that the Under-Secretary, knowing the history of the new line, and following the negotiation step by step through all its stages, determined to waylay Mr. Dwerrihouse, rob him of the £75,000, and escape to America with his booty. In order to effect these ends, he obtained leave of absence a few days before the time appointed for the payment of the money, secured his passage across the Atlantic in a steamer advertised to start on the 23rd, provided himself with a heavily loaded life preserver, and went down to Blackwater to await the arrival of his victim. How he met him on the platform with a pretended message from the board, how he offered to conduct him by a short cut across the fields to Mallingford, how, having brought him to a lonely place, he struck him down with a life preserver, and so killed him, and how, finding what he had done, he dragged the body to the verge of an out-of-the-way chalk pit, and there flung it in, and piled it over with branches and brambles, are facts still fresh in the memories of those who, like the connoisseurs in De Quincey's famous essay, regard murder as a fine art. Strangely enough, the murderer, having done his work, was afraid to leave the country. He declared that he had not intended to take the director's life, but only to stun and rob him, and that, finding that the blow had killed, he dared not fly for fear of drawing down suspicion upon his own head. As a mere robber, he would have been safe in the States, but as a murderer, he would inevitably have been pursued and given up to justice. So he forfeited his passage, returned to the office as usual at the end of his leave, and locked up his ill-gotten thousands till a more convenient opportunity. In the meanwhile, he had the satisfaction of finding that Mr. Dwerrihouse was universally believed to have absconded with the money, no one knew how or whither. Whether he meant murder or not, however, Mr. Augustus Raikes paid the full penalty of his crime, and was hanged at the Old Bailey in the second week in January 1857. Those who desire to make his further acquaintance may see him any day, admirably done in wax, in the Chamber of Horrors at Madame Tussaud's exhibition in Baker Street. He is there to be found in the midst of a select society of ladies and gentlemen of atrocious memory, dressed in the close-cut tweed suit which he wore on the evening of the murder, and holding in his hand the identical life preserver with which he committed it. Hi, I hope you're enjoying the stories. You may be aware that as of recently, YouTube is no longer sharing me any part of the ad revenue or the premium membership, which, to be fair to them, they did, and it was really helpful. But that means that I'm kind of doing these stories without their financial support. And that means the only people who are supporting me are my listeners. So if you are in a position to do this, could you come over to www.patreon.com/Barcud, BARCUD, and sign up for the basic tier, which is $5 a month, which is just about the price of a cup of coffee in the UK these days. So that would help me keep going, and I would be really appreciative. And listen, I know that not everybody can do that, and that's fine. And if you're in that position, please do continue listening to the stories with my total blessing and my hopes that, you get some enjoyment out of the stories, and it adds a bit of joy to your day. So that was, by Amelia B. Edwards, The 4:15 Express, and it's a Christmas ghost story. I'm in my Christmas ghost story season at the moment. You'll be pleased to see that it's pretty much audio only. So you remember I started to do video in the vain hope of convincing YouTube that I'm a real person, but it didn't work. So I can go back to doing audio, which I'm more comfortable with, and given the amount of complaints I got from the video, so are you. That isn't to say some people didn't like it, but it was overwhelmingly negative, the comments that did comment on it. So anyway, elephant in the room is that there's no income coming in from YouTube now, which is a big blow, as it was over 50% of my monthly income. So belts need to be tightened. I'll tell you a sweet thing, and the reason I'm mentioning this is, and I want to give a shout out to, is my beloved daughter Imogen, who's been helping me with the doing videos, and particularly because she's an artist, you know, and we've been thinking about AI. Aren't we going to abandon AI art thumbnails? That's what we're hoping to do. We don't think that they'll work as well. The sad truth is they work, but we are going to be true to our principles, even if it means impoverishing ourselves. And she has said that she doesn't want to be paid for her work. So she was working in a school and she gave up her job. She's got part-time work, but partly to help me out on this. And so it's been a bit of a blow to her. But isn't that sweet? My heart melted. But she's a good girl. But I am going to pay her. Things will work out, don't worry. I'm not without resources. And I don't mean money resources. I mean wit and tenacity. So crack on. Anyway, let's talk about somebody else with wit and tenacity. Oh, you like the segue there? Segue? Whatever you call it. Amelia B. Edwards, born 1831 in Islington, London. Amelia Ann Blandford, not Blandford, but Blandford Edwards, grew into one of Victorian Britain's most versatile cultural figures, a successful novelist and journalist, a spirited traveller, and ultimately a driving force in the birth of professional Egyptology. If you don't know about her, that might surprise you, but it was a big part of her career. We've done stories by Amelia before. She's very, very good. I did, The Phantom Coach, a great story. This one, 4:15 Express. Did the story of Salome, set in Venice, great story. And A Night on the Borders of the Black Forest, which isn't so much a ghost story, it's an adventure story, but pretty good anyway. She was a big traveller, you see, and Black Forest clearly is in Germany. Okay, so she was educated at home by her Irish mother. Edwards published a poem at 7 and a story at 12, contributed to Chambers' journal, Dickens' Household Words, and All Year Round by Dickens, and built a reputation with sensation-leaning fiction such as Barbara's History, 1864. At least it's not Jennifer's Attention. If you saw my latest article on KDP books being flooded by nonsense AI-generated books, you'll get that one. I've just told you, haven't I? And the best-selling Lord Brackenbury, published 1880. Her enduring place in the literary canon rests on crisp ghost tales. Crisp they are, most famously The Phantom Coach, published 1864, which we've done, of course, and on travel writing that fused observation, wit, and careful research. After the death of parents, Edwards embraced independence and travel. With female companions, she tackled little-known regions, notably the Dolomites, chronicled in her book Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, published 1873. The turning point came in 1873-74 when she and Lucy Renshaw hired a dabieh, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and sailed the Nile to Abu Simbel. The experience remade her life. 1,000 miles up the Nile, 1877, captured Egypt's monuments with lively prose and her own watercolours, but it also confronted the damage wrought by tourists, looters and careless scholars. Out of that alarm grew action. In 1882, Edwards co-founded the Egypt Exploration Fund, now Society, with Reginald Stewart Pole, spearheading public campaigns, lecture tours across Britain and the United States, and subscriptions that financed field work for rising talents like Flinders Petrie. Remember him? She largely abandoned fiction, contributed hard for you to say, Egyptological entries to reference works, and became celebrated as the movement's godmother of Egyptology. It's a heck of a thing to walk around, who are you? I'm the godmother of Egyptology. Flippin' heck, take a seat. Have a coffee on the house. Edwards' private life was unconventional for her era. She broke off a brief engagement in 1851 and formed deep, often romantic attachments with women. She knew where her heart was pointing her, living for decades with Ellen Drew Brayshaw in Westbury-on-Trim near Bristol, and sustaining intense relationships with figures such as Ellen Rice Byrne, Marianne North, Lucy Renshaw, and later her confidant Kate Bradbury Griffith. She favoured practical suffrage activism, signing and supporting measures for women's rights, and kept a diplomatic tone even as she worked to widen access to education and scholarship. Her legacy was secured in death as in life. Edwards died of influenza on 15th April 1892 at Weston-super-Mare. She's buried at St Mary's, Henbury, beneath an obelisk with a stone ankh alongside Braysher. She bequeathed her Egyptian antiquities and library to University College London and endowed the first English chair in Egyptology, stipulating Flinders Petrie, as appointment, thus embedding women and men equally in the study she helped shape. Good on her. Somerville College, Oxford, received a significant tranche of her books, papers and watercolours. A blue plaque, I can't speak this morning, 2015 marks her early home at 19 Wharton Street, Clerkenwell. Today, or Clerkenwell if you want, today Edwards remembered as novelist, traveller campaigner and institution builder, a meticulous researcher with keen eye and steady will who transformed passion for the Nile into lasting scientific infrastructure. So let's talk about this story. Now, I'm trying to eschew my normal, let's look at the deep currents, let's look at the semiological reading of this. I'm trying to get away from that for today. I'll be back, don't you worry. But let's talk about this story, and we'll look at it kind of more rooted in history and money. So 415 Express by Amelia B. Edwards, as we know, published in 1866, key year, Christmas number of All the Year Round, Charles Dickens' weekly journal, under the seasonal wrapper title Mugby Junction. So she called it Mugby Junction. I wonder if she had a sub-editor, and she said, I want to call it the 415 Express, and the sub-editor went, nah. I've got something more clickable. I need something clickbaity, Amelia. And I think Mugby Junction will do it. So there we are. So it was a composite Christmas issue to which Dickens himself contributed the frame narrative, and several other authors supplied linked tales set in and around the railway junction. Now, do you remember we did The Haunted House by Dickens, which was another story like this from All the Year Round, in which Dickens wrote the frame story, which is a pretty good setup for a Christmas ghost story. And then all these other authors of the time wrote a chapter which were only very broadly connected, and so we ended. And then Dickens's chapter is this weird dream thing. So go and listen if you're so inclined. Go and listen to the Charles Dickens one that I've recently done. The first bit's kind of fairly standard good stuff. The second, you're probably going to need some magic mushrooms to get through it. I'm not encouraging that, by the way, in case the bots are listening. I'm against it. I'm against whatever they're against. I'm against. Please reinstate me. Stand firm, Tony. Stand on your principles. Okay. Sorry about that little thing there. So anyway, so she becomes Amelia B. Edwards. You know, her stories are so good that they become a staple of anthologies of Victorian ghost stories. You know, the story. So it's a really good setup because, she's such a good writer. The structure launches straight in. There he is. It's Christmas. On the train, he's going to stay with his friend Jelf and his wife, Jelf's wife, for Christmas. Sounds great. Sounds the Victorian Christmas, doesn't it? It's the Christmas we'd all want if we were Victorians, and maybe anyway. And he gets in, and there's this geezer gets in with him with a key, and he talks to him. And it's as if this man, well, we don't know at the time, he's just kind of talking as if he was in September. He doesn't really know he's in Christmas. It's a ghost. He doesn't know this. And it's done really well. And even the issue of the cigarette case, this is later explained by the fact the ghost didn't drop it. How can a ghost, because when you're an author, you have to think of physics reasons. You can stretch physics, but it depends how you set it up. So you say, this is a fantasy story, and we can do whatever we want. Or if you make it more realistic, you have to kind of play by the rules of realism. So, okay, it's not totally realistic. It's a ghost story. But, it's set in a realistic world of trains and finance. And therefore, it's not just like like a Kafka story or a Bruno Schultz's Under the Sign of the Sanatorium of the Hourglass. Go and listen to it. Or anything utterly weird like that. Even some of Clark Ashton Smith stuff, some of Lovecraft stuff, and a lot of fantasy stuff. This is in the real world, so it has to obey real world rules, or else it's funny. The readers will dismiss it. They'll go, that couldn't have happened. It's just about how you set it up. The same reader who was reading a total fantasy story may accept something utterly outlandish, explained that doesn't obey the rules of physics. A portal appears to another room, another realm. Oh, that's okay. Whereas if you did it here, they'd be like, hey, come on, he's on a train, on a branch line. So I think she does it really well. That was of the carriage hasn't been used, so it lay there since he got out in 23rd of September. So that explains that how does matter arise from the insubstantial ghost? She does it really well. And if you look at the structure of it, what you have is train, house party, and then you have the aftermath, the station, and the trial, really. So it's in 4 parts, and it just is done really well. You might say those are 4 beats. It's done really structurally well. There's no messing about. It's not fancy. It's not modernist. It is just well done, I think, very clear, and doesn't confuse the reader. It is. There's this theme of in Victorian stories, or of 19th century stories particularly, of the wrongly accused person. So in this case, it is our man Dwerrihouse. I like saying that. I'm listening to the Count of Monte Cristo en français because I'm trying to improve my French, and it's a abridged audiobook. And, of course, that's the key thing, the wrongly accused fighting against a system that is impervious. It sounds a bit like my own position, but, there are no coincidences in the world. And this is a key thing. Now, I'll tell you, if you want to read a story that is very much like that you rage against, and Dickens stories are like this. There are odd ones of Dickens stories that have this theme as well, of course, that somebody is wrongly accused and the system is so weighted against them that even their innocence is not enough, and we cry out for natural justice, but the world as it's portrayed, in Dickens it usually turns out all right, and it did in this case as well, the world as it is portrayed is not fair, and our innocent but through and virtuous hero cannot make it right. Now, great book about that is Charles Pallis's The Quincunx. I remember getting that many, many years ago in a bookshop in Henley-on-Thames in Oxfordshire. What had happened? I'll tell you what it was. The girl I was going out at the time had an interview in Oxford, so I drove her up to Oxford, and she was going to be there the rest of the day and get the train back, and I meandered back through Henley and coming down that way back to London. So happy days. I like Henley. I haven't been there for many years, but I used to go every now and again because I liked it. Anyway, boof. So let's look at the historical background. That's what I was saying. Rather than looking at archetypes and I've just talked about the innocent, the wronged innocent, and things eventually come right. Charles Palliser is such a great book. It's a massive doorstopper, but it keeps you going because he makes his protagonist really, he squeezes the pips, and the injustice is piled upon injustice. I think, if am I correct in saying A Woman in White's like that as well? So it's a Victorian staple theme of the wronged innocent and the struggles to fight against a weighted system. Anyway, so let's talk about railway capitalism. So things repeat themselves, don't they? And we all know about these financial bubbles. And when we look at them from afar, we go, oh, that was mad. Why did you think that was a good thing? So we look at the South Sea bubble where everybody was investing in the South Sea. I can't remember. It was insurance or something, and it blew. And you look back at it now, I think, poof, that was nuts. The tulip bubble, whereby people were buying tulips because tulips would get rich quick. And then, of course, we had the dot-com bust. And currently we have the AI bubble. And all the signs are that these companies are putting trillions of dollars into AI. And it's like, if you look at the mathematics behind it, they simply cannot recoup their investment. Whatever advantages at the moment that AI offers, and I'm not against AI. We can talk about this as well, but maybe somewhere else, maybe here. So the point about this is, so the first view is to say, I hate AI because it's dehumanizing. It is the machine. And that, I'm reading Paul Kingsworth's book Against the Machine. So I have some sympathy for that, but not complete sympathy. Listen, Paul Kingsworth's arguments are great, and him and Ian McGilchrist and people like that, they're saying really important things about what it is to be human. Even though it's a big subject, I just want to park it for the minute. I am not, let's jump back to it. One of the things that I think about Amazon, and of course, it being reflexive, I have reason not to like Amazon. So I put my cards on the table there. But that doesn't mean my reasons are I have my personal reason not to like Amazon. It maybe pointed me in the direction of disapproving them in general. And being a hypocrite as well, in that I still buy things from Amazon because you can't get them anywhere else. I go on eBay if I can. Anyway, this is like my debate about using AI art. I rack my soul about this, and I'm a born hypocrite, and I'm weak, and then I know I'm not going to do it. It's like me and eating chocolate, to be fair. I know I shouldn't, but I still do. But I try to minimize it anyway. Amazon has hollowed out the fact you live in a town or a city or a town, particularly it is for towns, have no shops in them. In the UK, the only shops we have are Turkish barber shops, many, many, many of them, mostly empty. American candy shops, completely empty. Nobody goes in them. And vape shops, same. Hardly anybody goes in those. So you have all these shops. Everything else is pretty much closed because everybody buys it from Amazon. And it's like a diminishing circle. Where can I buy a pair of socks? I probably still can buy a pair of socks. What about a pair of gloves? What about a dog collar? I might be able to get those. But it's a lot easier to go online. And of course, that's what hollowed out our city centres and town centres. And we're left with these false businesses, which are just, I believe it is generally believed that they are fronts for laundering money. So why are they allowed to be open? Because they take cash so they can inflate the amount of money they take. You would have thought that the police and the trading authorities could clearly see this, but they don't shut them down. There may be all sorts of technicalities into why they don't shut them down that I don't possibly understand, and I accept that. But the conspiracy theorist in me thinks, well, they're getting business rates from them, so, and if they don't have these, they've got nobody. So let's just allow the money laundering from prostitution and drugs. Why not? If it keeps the council in business. Again, deeply cynical. So where were we? Oh yeah, we're talking about bubbles, and that led me to talk about AI. And so I'm not against AI as such, in that, people who were against AI creating, like Midjourney creating art, will happily use digital art, will happily use Photoshop. And you could say, well, they're drawing it. But, a lot of photographers who use Photoshop actually use AI fills for the background. And they use these things. So that leads us on to that argument, which is AI is just a tool. On the face of it, there's nothing dangerous about AI. It's just a tool. Absolutely. That's true. A car is a tool, but it kills people. So it's not the tool that's killing people. It is the either intention or the lack of care. A gun is a tool. It kills people. The gun doesn't kill people. The person, that's the argument, the person. But then we have to look at the intent of the tool. So it could be that a kettle is a tool. An electric kettle is a tool. And you can die from an electric kettle. Of course you can. You could be scalded badly. You could be electrocuted. Same as a gun. But the issue there is the intention behind the tool. So when somebody creates one of these tools, it is not intention-free. So, for example, a gun is intended simply, the only purpose of a gun is to kill things. It has no other function. A kettle has a function. The function of a kettle is to boil water. If it kills people, it's incidental. If a gun kills somebody, that's what it's designed for. So I think we need to be not naive when we're looking at the tool is AI. What is the intention of AI? Well, I don't think AI is intended to kill people. I think it's intended to maximize profits for tech corporations. So incidentally, it may help people. And that is probably a big incidental use of it. But its main job is to maximize profit for these companies. I think that's simply, and I think they're misplaced. I think this is where they're putting their feet wrong. And this isn't me saying this, is based on what I read. But they've invested too much money. It's like the gambler who's lost a lot of money on the horses and he borrows money to put money on the horses to win it back. It might work, but it increasingly becomes less true. What has this got to do with the 415 Express? I think that's a fair point, because in the 1850s and 60s, there was a railway boom in the UK. So railways, you could argue, you could turn it around on me. So the purpose of railways, the incidental value of railways is to transport people, but the purpose of the railway companies is to make money for themselves. Okay, I accept that. And I accept that there is a parallel between that and AI. In that, I've just said the evil corporations want to maximize their profits. Yeah, of course they do. But the man who opens a shoe shop wants to maximize his profits as well. I mean, the fact that he helps people with shoes is incidental, really, to his main aim, which is to enrich himself, and are we saying there's anything wrong with that? I think we've got to be very puritanical, and coming from a particular kind of puritanical, I don't mean a religious puritanical, but a kind of ideological puritanism, to say that is wrong, because, the guy who sells you milk is doing exactly the same thing, etc., etc. So, anyway, the railway boom. What happened was they built the main lines, and then there was a maze. It's like crypto. I'm not against cryptocurrency either. What am I, cryptocurrency has a downside in that it's speculative, it encourages gambling, it is far from a reliable source of income or enrichment. Whenever you see somebody selling you get rich quick, you should be skeptical, because that's not the way the world works in general. But there are advantages to cryptocurrency in that it is not controlled by government. So, the governments want their own digital currency. At the moment, you've got cash in your pocket. That's increasingly being phased out. Digital currency allows the people who own the digital currency to switch it off and to thus control your behavior. And we've seen this in China, whereby if people weren't, the government didn't allow them to travel. If they were persona non grata, they couldn't buy train tickets, as I believe. And I think, the nature of government is to wish to control its people. I told you I'm an anarchist. That is just what it does. So in the same way, philosophically, I might ask, why do the tech bros want to have even more money? What are you going to do with it? What does it help you do better, having 15 billion rather than 3 billion? Well, nothing. So you end up fripperizing it on nothing. So the same point is, why do governments want to control us? It's because that's what they do. What you might say, why does a cat eat? Well, why does a tiger eat people? Because it's hungry. That isn't what they're doing. But why does a cat play? Because it's driven with its prey. Because it's driven to do that, by some instinctive urge. So the urge to enrich oneself goes over and above the practical and the reasonable and the responsible and the rational. It is like, why do people eat so much chocolate till they become absolutely obese? It's the same thing. It's like a cancerous thing. So it's the enrichment beyond all possible use is ridiculous. So the parallel with that is the people who seek power want to have more power, because it's like it's a cancerous overgrowth of a natural wish to have power enough to enable yourself to flourish, There is, or to do good. It's not really about doing good, I don't think. That isn't to say some politicians don't go into politics to try and do good. I believe probably they do, being charitable. But once you get, I think Joe Rogan was saying this, I don't actually listen to Joe Rogan's podcast, but inevitably you get clips, and he was saying, you start off as a I was going to say evangelical, but I don't mean that. I mean idealistic, evangelical, not in a Christian sense. But and you want to do good, and then you get into politics and you learn the ropes from the old lags. This is the way you do it. You make this deal, you make that deal. You get your back scratched, we scratch your back, you scratch our back, and sooner or later you find you've become totally corrupted. So. Yeah, there we are. That's governments for you. Digital currencies. So, crypto. I got this because I was talking about cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency, the good thing about it is when the blockchain, they don't own it. That's why they hate it. That's why they want to create their own so they can control you. That's why. And why do they want to control you? Because it's a cancerous overgrowth of a natural drive, in the same way as eating 14 kilograms of chocolate a day and making yourself so obese you can't get out your front door. People do that. Is a cancerous overgrowth of a natural urge, i.e. to eat. There we are. I don't know how we ended up with that. But yeah, we're talking about the bubble in the 1860s. Same thing. So this, not quite the same thing, to be fair, but this related urge to jump on the bandwagon and become get rich quick. So people were investing money in branch lines, so the main lines were profitable, and then they thought, I'll tell you what, we'll build a line between Littlehampton and tiny Bridlington. I came up with those names, not really related to the real places, and in case anybody complains, that's it. And so let's have a branch line between I tell you what, Aspatria and Plumland. And so people, because they didn't think it through like these AI people, that actually there's not enough people to pay your money back for your investment. So what happened was all these branch lines got made out of this get rich quick, and they were useful for the people there. And then as car ownership grew, we get to the 1960s, and we have the beaching cuts, and a lot of these branch lines are completely axed. Some of them probably wrongly so. I always think there's a branch line that ran from Workington to Penrith, in case you know. The purpose of the Workington line was to, when there was there wasn't oil, coal and iron and steel working it was the purpose. That's what it purposed. It was an industrial line. It also went through the Lake District, which later became a national park, a very beautiful part of England. And so there was a tourist use as well. Now the industry is being closed down, but the tourist and beaching cut that line completely. But I think if he kept it open, it would probably be doing well with tourism these days because it's so pretty. Anyway, but also that's like, I'm on a real roll of ramble this morning. That's like public transport. Let's stick with public transport. We all believe in it, don't we? We all believe in the so-called mom and pop stores. We want to shop from Mrs. Bailey, who knows us, who knew our mother, and we want to buy the things, and she says, I'll tell you what, you're a bit short this week, I'll give you that, that's no problem. Or just let me, that kind of thing that used to sometimes happen in a community, in a rooted community. And we want that, but we didn't use their shops. We went online because it was easier and cheaper and more convenient, and so they went bust. And now we're filled with vape stores and Turkish barbers and hard American candy stores, which are kept going not through a bubble, but through, as we've talked, laundering probably. And same as public transport, we all think it's great. Bus services, absolutely a social need, but we don't use them. They go past my house, empty. I don't use them. I mainly walk, to be fair. Or if I'm going out of town, it's just not convenient for me. Say if I have to go and see my daughters, which I don't do as much as I ought to, in West Cumbria, it's 30 miles plus. On a bus, it's going to take me a long time. It's not going to be massively expensive because it's subsidised. But I don't do it. I just get in the car. Because I've got the car. So there are many things we approve of and we don't use, or if we do use, it's like cash, isn't it? I've just talked about the benefits of cash. Do I use cash? Well, I used to make a point of going to get cash and using cash, and then you find businesses don't take cash, and then it's pain, and then you lose your cash and all. But there are advantages to cash anyway. So there we go. So there we are. In the 1860s, there was a bubble of financial spending commitment on these branch lines. So she's playing in that. You forgot about the story now, haven't you? We're still talking about Amelia B. Edwards. So Dwerringhouse embezzles 75. Well, he doesn't actually, but it was contemporary reality. So it's not a Gothic invention. So there were cases such as Leopold Redpath, who embezzled 250,000 from the Great Northern Railway in 1856, and John Sadler, who was a railway financier and MP, Member of Parliament, who defrauded investors before his 1856 suicide. So that was true. And she talks about the railway director as type. And so Dwerry House is written by Amelia Edwards. She would have been aware of this type of person from the news, or she may even have known some. The nouveau riche professional wielding enormous power with minimal oversight, his vanity and self-absorption. So this is exactly what he's like. He seemed to have himself and his affairs so entirely upon his mind, she says, and he goes on, drones on, much like myself, about things that are of no interest to anybody else. So if we're going to be, it's a capitalist modernity, my notes say. But we see this, and also we have to kind of step behind this caricature of the vulgar industrialist, because you see this in Victorian fiction. So what we have is and they built, you go to the north of England, Lancashire, Yorkshire, Durham, Tyne Wear, our own part, West Cumbria, Barrow, Furness, anyway, I could just enumerate all the counties, Ellesmere Port, and Derbyshire and everywhere like that. And what you see is, and people like D.H. Lawrence, and we're talking about this scene, what you see is that these industrialized villages that have been made very, very ugly, and with the pit and other steelworks, Redcar, or the chemical works, but the pit and their owners would build this Gothic Victorian mansion within woods. I mean, this is classic D.H. Lawrence territory, and so what we have, and they start, very interestingly, they take up pheasant shooting, a lot of them. This is really interesting as well. What was the book I was reading? Oh, there's a guy called Trigger who walked the Great North Road, Great North Track, Narrow Road to the Great North. I know Basho did a book about that, but it was a play on that. And he walked from the Isle of Wight right up to Lindisfarne, and he walks through some of this country, and so he talks about stuff as he's going. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it. He wild camped the whole way, and what you see is these mansions and estates, these sooty Gothic masterpieces, huge houses. Oh yeah, and he talks about how they took up pheasant shooting because that was what gentlemen did. So they are rich and they aspire to be in the upper echelons and have the markers of the upper class, and so they have the big house, fair enough. But the upper class sneer at them. The landed gentry and the county snobs, as Show of Hands call them, they sneer at them because they are nouveau riche, and they would do things like make them go in by the tradesman's entrance and things like that to remind them they were not born of the true blood, but they were aspiring. And so they would send their children to expensive public schools. And in a generation or so, these children have been educated properly, talk properly, know all the social cues, become almost as good as the aristocracy, but not quite. But my point here is that, and the working classes, of course, they thought nothing of either of them really, because they were both oppressive to them. But perhaps the industrialists more so than the gentry, although it depends where you lived. I think they were both probably pretty oppressive. So what we've got to be careful of is allowing ourselves the schadenfreude at these nouveau riche, self-important, narcissistic industrialists, because we're playing a little bit into the aristocracy's snobbery, and we can borrow theirs when it isn't really ours to borrow, unless you are an aristocrat. That's fair enough, then it's totally yours. But for the bulk of us, we're cleaning the stairs in the big house of both of these kind of people. So I think my point is, yes, it's great to have a laugh at him and look at the pomposity of him, but be careful, because we're kind of playing into this snobbish view. Nouveau riche. You've got to think also that the railway was new, and what happened was you're putting people together in a compartment. I mean, remember, it was very class-based, third class, fourth class, first class. So it wasn't completely like that, but you were put with strangers into a compartment and you didn't know them. So your normal cues, people are coming from a society where they know where everybody is. They know who belongs in which level and what deference is owed to people and what ranks and what titles and the way you speak to them. And you have to look for the clues in the way they're dressed, the way they talk, how they do themselves. So there is this anxiety of, I don't know where I am now. Because whenever we as human beings are put in situations that we're not certain that what the rules are, we become very anxious. And so class mixing was a real worry in those days. There were murders in 1864, the murder of Thomas Briggs. The first murder on a British train occurred only 2 years before Edward's story. So there was real anxiety. Who is this person going to murder me? Are they going to murder me? And the class thing. And the other issue was, for women, the danger to them of being in a compartment in a place away from any help with a man who was predatory. And so ladies only compartments were created in 1844 as a method of combating this, not just a worry but a reality, sadly. Now, from our point of view, we see how this liminal space, it's a place between, it's a temporary place. I think T.S. Eliot in Dry Salvages talks about this. I'm actually going to quote this for you because I love Eliot, actually. It's probably one of my favourite poets. Who else? R.S. Thomas. I like R.S. Thomas. Edward Thomas as well. I'm probably showing my age there. I'm not old enough, but what I mean is these were the kind of poets who taught us when we were at school. Anyway, this is from the third part of Dry Salvages. I'm not going to read it all. This is Eliot now. I sometimes wonder if that is what Krishna meant, among other things, or one way of putting the same thing, that the future is a faded song, a royal rose or a lavender spray of wistful regret for those who are not yet here to regret, pressed between yellow leaves of a book that has never been opened. And the way up is the way down, the way forward is the way back. You cannot face it steadily, but this thing is sure, that time is no healer. The patient is no longer here. When the train starts and the passengers are settled to fruit, periodicals and business letters, and those who saw them off have left the platform, their faces relax from grief into relief to the sleepy rhythm of 100 hours. Fare forward, travellers, not escaping from the past into different lives or into any future. You are not the same people who left that station or who will arrive at any terminus while the narrowing rails slide together behind you, and on the deck of the drumming liner, watching the furrow that widens behind you, you shall not think the past is finished or the future is before us. At nightfall, in the rigging and the aerial, is a voice descanting, though not to the ear, the murmuring shell of time, and not in any language. Fare forward, you who think that you are voyaging. You are not those who saw the harbour receding, or those who will disembark. Here, between the hither and the farther shore, while time is withdrawn, consider the future and the past with an equal mind. And so it goes on. Another digression is people will often comment on stories that I like. Inevitably, there's so many comments. Some of them are going to be, that was boring. And I'm like, really? I mean, I have it recently. Somebody comment on Shirley Jackson. Well, that was rubbish. I go, is it you that's rubbish? And I would like to pretend I don't judge. I'd like to pretend it, but I'm not going to. Anyway, so the other thing to say about 415 Express, and we are talking about this story slowly but surely, is the legal testimony. So she actually writes it like a criminal trial procedure. Now, there was an issue in the 1860s about testimony reliability. So a lot of it is about establishing one's, if you've ever been to court, one of the first things you do, I used to go in my role in work, and I would have to say my name, my qualifications, to establish myself as a reliable witness, as an authoritative witness, So this is, I am a commercial traveller in the stationary line. I have neither time nor inclination for reading of any kind. So the legal culture privileged plain men as reliable witnesses. So what he's saying is, I'm a no-nonsense Englishman. And none of this foreign frippery. I am reliable. I'm plain. And so he establishes himself as, and it's all done. The material evidence. I took out the cigar case. Then how do you account for that? I asked, laying it on the table. It's just like a court case, isn't it? It's a presentation of Exhibit A. And this issue of, we have Langford's view and the guards, Summers, are at odds. Summers saying Dwyer House wasn't there, and Langford saying yes, he was. And they do this kind of formal legal stuff. I'm ready to take my oath. I stake my situation on it. So this is it's just interesting. It struck me how it is like it's like one of the legal drama, isn't it? And what we've got is, we talked about many times about, and I started off talking about this, how you establish the supernatural in a real world, and this story is very much in a real world, but there's a ghost in it as well. And so what we have is the contradiction, and so there is a third ontological category, the supernatural witness who is both present and absent. And this mirrors the contemporary Tichborne case, 1866-1874, where contradictory but equally credible testimony obsessed Victorian Britain by exposing testimony's fundamental unreliability. And if you, when I did my psychology degree, there's all this about, what people notice. And there was these Dutch experiments, I think, whereby they would ask people to account, they would show them a video, then they would get people to say what happened. And they would influence the person's belief of what happened and their memory by using certain words. When the car slid, when the car halted, when the car smashed, and people would then, what can you describe when the car smashed into the other car? Well, and then people actually see it as a far more violent occurrence. So, and people notice what they notice. It's incredible, like the famous gorilla experiment, whereby there's a man in a gorilla suit and you just won't. Now, you go on YouTube and you'll see, YouTube, and you'll see an example of this, whereby there's a man in a gorilla suit, and if you're looking out for him, there he is. But if you're not looking out for him, you just don't see him. And so there's the issue of reliability, and this was the Victorian, in the 1860s, it was a big thing, a big debate, probably similar to the AI debate now. Anyway, so I'm running out of time, really, but I think it's a fantastically well-written story. It's given me the opportunity for endless rambles, which is always a good thing from my point of view. But it's in itself, just forget my rambling. The story in itself is such a gem of enjoyment. And her work is like that, and I'm a big fan of hers. And I'm less of a fan of A Night on the Borders of the Black Forest. I love Story of Salome, and I love The Phantom Coach, and I love this. I love The Phantom Coach because of the weird guy she meets, the weird alchemist guy that the protagonist meets on the North Pennine Moors, or the Northumberland Moors. I'm not sure which it is. They are related. They join. But there we are. Anyway, okay, I hope you're well. As you can see, I'm fairly chipper. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I feel there's a way forward. Not necessarily for... I don't mean remonetization of YouTube. I'm hoping that will happen, obviously. Who wouldn't want to be able to buy fripperies? But thinking about my own direction as a writer and a narrator, what am I doing? Am I here to serve a sleepy audience who thinks I'm a nice guy? But if I die tomorrow, that's a shame, they'll say, and listen to another nice guy. Oh, yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to some nice guys, by the way. Since my troubles, Ian Gordon of Horror Babble, Jasper Lestrange of Encrypted Horror, and Simon of Bite-Sized Audio have all personally contacted me to offer any support they can. And so that shows there are some absolutely old-fashioned gentlemen around still, and I really appreciate what they've done there. They're decent coves. Anyway, that's enough. Bye.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody's coming back, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked drawer today, didn't you? You tried.
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret?